Hey friends, welcome back to Unbottled Potential. Amanda here, and I just had the most wonderful conversation with my friend Becky Vollmer that I'm about to share with you. Becky and I met several years ago through Sober Friends when she was down here in Austin to teach one of her workshops. And we stayed connected. I actually got to hang out with her a couple of months ago when I went back home to Missouri. She's also a Missouri gal, just like me. So you know she's good, Midwestern people. And she is just the loveliest soul. She is releasing her first book, You Are Not Stuck, on January 3rd. And so we would love for you to buy a copy. I think that as listeners to this show, as people who identify with my values and my way of teaching, I know that you will enjoy Becky and her work and that you will get a lot from reading her book and hopefully supporting this great work that she is putting out into the world. So please allow me to formally introduce you to my friend Becky Vollmer. She is a speaker, yoga teacher, and creator of You Are Not Stuck, a movement that empowers people to pursue the lives they most deeply desire. She guides a global community on social media that is several 100,000 strong, teaches online courses about empowerment and choice, and leads sold-out programs that combine movement, breathwork, self-exploration, and action planning at yoga and wellness centers across the country. A former newspaper journalist, Becky writes on topics including personal growth, relationships, mental health and wellness, mindfulness, meditation, and spirituality. She is also a leading voice in the sobriety and recovery community. Becky lives in St. Louis, Missouri with her husband, their 4 children, 3 pets, and more flowers than one person should be allowed. Please, my friends, enjoy this conversation with my dear friend, Becky Vollmer. Okay, friends, welcome today. I am so excited to share a special treat with you. We are talking with my friend, Becky Vollmer, who I've had the pleasure to meet in real life and give a real life squeeze and hug to. And we're going to talk about her new book that has been a lifetime practice for her. It's called You Are Not Stuck. Becky, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Well, I want to start by just letting you introduce yourself to the audience. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? What is your great work in this world?
Oh, who am I and what do I do? Let's see. The short answer, I'm a mom, I'm a kid mom, I'm a dog mom, I'm a cat mom. No, that's probably not what you
No, those are important things. Those are very important things because that's how you serve the people closest to you.
Yeah, and so in that vein, I'm really just a teenage taxi driver.
Hey.
That's my daily vocation. In my spare time, when I'm not the teenage taxi driver, I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a writer. I'm a corporate dropout. I'm an advocate for empowerment. I'm somebody who brings people together to tell their stories and ask themselves the deep guiding questions about life. I'm a big advocate of the 80% rule. Like, you can dial back the effort to about 80% and it will still be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm just this, believe it or not, this is you asked me before we started, what's one question that you love answering, or what's one question that you're over being asked? This is one I have not been asked before. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, it's hard sometimes to give let me summarize my life and my life's purpose into one question. But what I will share with everyone listening, how I know you is, we are both sober, alcohol-free women. And I know you through your yoga teachings and just through the bright light that you shed into this world and that you're sharing with so many people. And so recently you are doing that through becoming an author, which is so rad and what we want to talk a little bit about today. But before we even do that, I would love for you to share, because the connective thread here is our journey to be alcohol free, and you share a bit about that in your book. Could you tell us how you decided to change that part of your life, how you decided to quit drinking?
Oh, wow. Why don't you start with a harder question?
I know. You said I'm just trying to make this completely different than the other interviews that you've done. But you summarize it really well in your book, but it's a hard journey to come to, because you, like many of the people who I know, have kind of a very normalized relationship with alcohol, where you were showing up, everything looked great on the outside, but on the inside, things weren't quite going so well. So what did it look like for you?
Oh, yeah. I'm coming up on 9 years of sobriety.
Woo!
I can guarantee when those first tender days and weeks and months and even years, I didn't know if I was going to get to this place where I'd ever say like, oh God, many years of sobriety, but it has been the blessing of my lifetime to choose this path. I grew up in a house where you said the word normalized. I mean, alcohol was part of everything. My dad was a big problem drinker, as was his dad before him. And as I understand it, his father before him. And so, it was in the bloodlines. It was in my home. It was in every activity. We celebrated with alcohol. We mourned with alcohol. We passed the time with alcohol. And so, I was close to an everyday drinker in my teens. I look back on the time and I can only imagine what kind of image I must have presented to the world, like this, cute little suburban white girl in her Catholic school plaid uniform with like a Marlboro in one hand and a long neck bud in another. Like, I can only imagine. My mother was just beside herself. And then as I got older and I progressed in my life, my drinking also progressed. I went from drinking really, really like nasty teenage concoctions of things that you would never think to mix together to like, I became a wine snob. And as I moved up in my career, every raise and every promotion was celebrated with even nicer bottles of wine. And, it wasn't until I made the choice to leave the corporate world. That's what I think of as being like my first whack at getting unstuck. And I had 2 little girls at the time, and they were 3 and 5, and I for the first time, like, I had space in my life. I had peace in my life. I wasn't under that constant pressure of work and deadlines and all of the things I'd had such a hard time managing the previous years. And I kind of thought that everything would just level out for me and become a little easier and a little softer. And quite the opposite happened. I mean, here I was, I left my job, and all of a sudden, without those deadlines and without that pressure to perform or to be anywhere at a particular place or time, my drinking absolutely skyrocketed. And, there was nobody to tell me, no, I could day drink whenever I wanted. I could, I could start drinking much earlier in the evening, turned cocktail hour, turned like early afternoon, and nobody was there to tell me, hey, that's not such a great idea. But once I realized, here I had broken free from the thing that I thought represented the biggest chains in my life, that big job that was so overwhelming. And I realized that the real chains in my life were alcohol related.
Yeah, the ones you created.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, I had a real, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a woo woo, come to Jesus, like soul spoke to me for the first time. This was in a yoga workshop. And the voice inside me, it bellowed at me as I'm having this real quiet moment, this reflective moment. It just screamed like, you drink too much. And I was so taken aback because that voice, even though my brain knew that, I'd probably been trying to quit drinking for a decade. There was something about this voice that was different. I know for a fact it was the voice of my soul. And that was when I really sat up straight and listened. And that was the day of my last drink.
Oh, I have full body. I can feel the hairs on my little head tingling because I know that voice, and many of the people listening know that voice of, you've been like kind of fiddling with it. And like you said, 10 years dabbling with the thought. And then all of a sudden the voice has been whispering, whispering, whispering. And then all of a sudden it becomes a roar and you can't ignore it from that. I mean, you can, but things aren't going to turn out so well if you do. And I mean, seriously, I can still feel my scalp tingling, just this feeling of knowing that this isn't working out for you. And I was going to ask this question a little later, but because you brought up that this happened to you in yoga practice, I'd love if you would share a little bit about, most of the women who listen to my show and follow me are kind of on a sober curious and a spiritually curious path, whether they've identified those things or not. And there's, for me too, I was doing all the spiritual things. Like I was checking those spiritual boxes, doing the yoga, doing the meditation, doing the journaling. What was it like for you to be in that kind of double bind of, trying to become this woke woman doing these practices, and then also, having this part of you that you were just you're literally just wasting everything away with your drinking persona.
Yeah. It was an interesting juxtaposition to be a drinking yogi. So many people who have a real meaningful yoga practice will eschew alcohol just because it doesn't fit in with the lifestyle. And here I didn't realize it, but I was a real outlier in the yoga community as somebody who was a very devoted student and a teacher who I mean, even back then, what I was teaching was, yes, it was asana based, but it was very inclusive of yoga philosophy. And yet I would be the one suggesting, in a marketing conversation, why don't we have, yoga and wine night? And, some of the other people would just sort of give me this side eye glance, like, what are you even talking about? And I think because drinking was such an inherently normal, and I'm, putting air quotes around that, because it was such a normal part of my life, I didn't know that it was abnormal. And I certainly didn't know at the time that it was so counter to my yoga practice until I did. And, it's funny the way I view it now. I almost look back at that woman that I was. It's not a look back with shame. It's not a look back with judgment, but like, it's a real, like, oh, you sweet thing.
Sweetheart. Yeah.
You didn't know what you didn't know.
Yeah.
And, but once it did start to seep into me that these two parts of my life were just incongruous, they were out of alignment, I really started to feel fraudulent. And it became, I think my inability to stop drinking became a point of shame, more because of how I viewed it through the lens of my yoga practice than I viewed it through the lens of anything else.
Yeah.
Because it seemed normal for my family. It seemed normal for my workplace. It seemed normal for my group of friends. But the place where it didn't fit was in my yoga community.
So I'm hearing like it seemed normal for the person that you were and you were taught to be, but not for the person who you were meant to be. And that is, I'm actually almost just paraphrasing something you wrote in your introduction, that you spend your life wearing these, showing up, doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you thinking you're nailing it. And then all of a sudden you realize, yeah, for the person they told me to be, that's okay. But for the person I am supposed to be in this world, this isn't right. And I just want to honor that you listen to that voice, because you are such a more powerful and potent, I didn't know you before you quit drinking, but I know without even that you're a more powerful and potent teacher and version of you as you let that habit go. And that's really cool. That's really badass that you listened to that knowing instead of all of the other voices that were like, no, this is okay. Keep going, keep doing what you're doing.
It's funny. I don't know that I ever look back on it in those terms, that, I'm a more powerful and potent teacher than I would have been had I continued drinking. to hear you say that, there is absolutely not a doubt in my mind that what you're saying is 1,000,000% true.
Yeah.
I just don't know that I've ever looked at it through that lens before. So
well, it's almost like, how could you? Yeah, of course. But I even see it, I talk about how when you drink, you never are disconnected from spirit, right? You were having spiritual and yogic experiences while you were a drinker, but it's like you were having them, you were getting a message that was relayed through a shitty connection. And then if you were the teacher, then you are then relaying that message to the student. So it's like a game of telephone played through a tin can with a string versus a game of telephone played from a state-of-the-art iPhone with the like 5G, no matter what you believe about what 5G is, but like with a 5G tower, like right there. So you're relaying yourself as a channel is just so much stronger because you're getting actually fully clear, high quality message. And that is what I know to be true. Even if no one can conceptualize, well, how can we know that Becky is a better, more potent teacher? Like, you just have to know because the channel is clear that you're going to get a better message and relay that to your students in a better capacity.
Yeah. And I love that imagery. And, to hear you say it, my God, just the idea of clearing the channel, making the connection more, more secure, more clear, more making that signal more powerful. Isn't that really what so much of this work is about? Whether it's about, taking alcohol out of the picture, the work that we do to remove some of the, the attachments that we have, the aversions that we have, the resentments that we have, all of that work is to make the channel more clear. And it is absolutely the work of a lifetime. And by that, I mean, it is the most difficult work we do. It is also by far the most meaningful and rewarding, and the work that pays the richest dividends.
Yeah, totally. It is. Well, that kind of leads me to a transition of, one of the ways that you were stuck in life is with your relationship with alcohol, but there's also a myriad of ways in addition to that. So what do you mean when you talk about being like the phenomenon of being stuck? What does that mean to you? And how might people find themselves in this place or know that they're in this place where they're stuck?
I think, in some ways it's like the old definition of obscenity. It's like, it when you see it, right? I know for me, feeling stuck is very much it shows up as a body experience. It's for me, when I'm feeling really stuck, I feel almost physically trapped. Like, I can't move left. I can't move right. And I feel it in my chest. It's almost like it's the breath I cannot take.
Yeah.
It's like what I imagine being alive in a coffin would feel like. I know for some other folks, it shows up, and it seems to show up a lot like this. Like it's a mental question. It's almost like that reaction you have to somebody puts a 10,000 piece puzzle in front of you. And it's just so overwhelming that you don't know where to start, and you just can't figure out what is what's any right step, much less the next right step. And so what I hear from people a lot, and, when I say that, I mean, I don't just mean anecdotally. What I hear through the results of some research that I put into the field a few years ago is that when people feel stuck, they tend to, I asked them questions. I wanted to test how they feel about feeling stuck, but then also what they do in response to feeling stuck. And those answers are just so interesting because what I learned more than anything is that the sensation of stuckness is absolutely universal, right? It is something that, it just transcends gender and race and religion and geography and age. And there really are a whole lot of common threads about the way people feel about it and the way they respond to it.
Yeah. So, can you share some of those?
Yeah. So when I ask people, what do you typically, how do you feel about feeling stuck? the most common responses were things like, I feel sad, depressed, and I feel overwhelmed. And I feel like there's no way out. And then, to ask them then, and what do you do when you tend to feel stuck? The most common responses were, I withdraw, I cry, and I procrastinate, which I don't know about you, but I can relate to all of those.
Yeah, I like a good triple threat if you ask me.
To withdraw, to cry, and procrastinate. That has summed up some periods of my life, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, the areas in which people said they felt the most stuck, this was also, this made a lot of sense to me because it mirrors the areas where I felt it most. Number one was in jobs. Number two was in relationships, either intimate relationships or with close family members. And then the third area was just in, our personal habits and our behavior patterns.
Yeah. So,
oh,
go ahead.
Well, just to kind of close the loop on that, the most interesting finding in that whole bit of research was it brought me to something that I call the empowerment gap. I asked folks, did they feel, was there a need to change? Did they feel ready to change? And did they feel empowered to change? And the affirmative responses just took a nosedive as you got into those three questions. So, ballpark, about 60% of people said, yep, I know I need to change. About 40% said they were ready to change. But it was only 14% of people who said they felt actually empowered to make a big change in their life. And it's in that space there, right? That space between knowing you need to and you're ready to, but then feeling empowered to change. That's the big gap. That's the empowerment gap that I think just holds people back. Even if they're miserable, even if they desperately want something different, it's that lack of, feeling authorized to make changes and take control of their own lives that holds us back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can give a personal example of even how that showed up for me in so many areas, but in my relationship to want to quit drinking, I did not want to take a traditional path to sobriety because that didn't feel congruent for me. And so I was looking for someone to empower me and tell me it was okay to take a different path, to just quit drinking, void of going to 12 steps or any of the other traditional recovery paths. And I could not find one. And so I stayed in that damn loop for well over a year, hoping that my next Google search might turn something up, might turn up a resource or a person to just give me the A-okay to go ahead with it. And I kept not finding one. So of course, that's how and why I do what I do today. But I had to fill my own gap. But what is the next step for anyone? What do you recommend to close up that gap?
There's a series of steps. For me, the first step is to really pick apart and understand what it is you don't want and why. I want to start with the negative. I want to start with what Rob Bell calls the South Star. And really get granular about what it is about that situation we don't want. And then use that information, with that information in hand, look forward to what it is we do want and why. And it's in that space between, it's in that contrast where we learn so much about what's not working and what we need instead. Because I don't know about you, Amanda, in your work, but often when I talk to people, there's often this sense of I don't know why, but what I'm doing just isn't working for me. I could just feel that it's just not right. But when you start to get them to go deeper and deeper about, well, what's not working? Why is that either not aligned with you? Or why is that offensive to you? Or why is that draining to you? The more information that people can carve out of those questions and then use it to shine the light on, oh, this is what I want instead. That is so often what tends to illuminate the path forward.
Oh, yeah. That's beautiful. So that is, I know you have a series of steps that you lead people through. Would this be a good time to dive a little bit deeper into those, or
Yeah,
is
sure.
there, yeah.
Sure.
So tell us in this place of feeling stuck. Okay. So you kind of look at, I know what I don't want now.
Mhm.
So what now? Where do I go from here?
Yeah, I think once you have the information in hand of like, there's another concept that I talk about in the book, which is called the indigestion of shoulds, right? It's
Mm,
this idea of that the distinction between what you think you should do, or maybe what society or other people in your life think you should do, versus then what you want to do. There's so much tension between those two places, the should and the
mhm,
want.
mm,
And I think if we, when we finally reach a point of just like the indigestion of shoulds, it's just like right up here up to my throat, and I cannot swallow one more should or else I'm going to burst. I think that's actually a really good place to be, because
mhm,
again, it illuminates what it starts to help us get clear on what do we want instead.
mhm.
And to almost, I don't want to say completely throw away, but I will say completely throw away everybody else's expectations,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
When we're stuck in this place between want and should, the shoulds really often point back to other people.
Yeah.
Well, my mother thinks I should do this. My spouse thinks I should do this. My controlling cousin thinks I should do this. Um, and yet we know we have a different vision
Mhm,
that, and too often we don't know what it is because we just haven't taken the time to explore it, but it's
mhm,
there. It just needs to be unearthed.
mm,
And so I start then with values.
mm,
And I
mhm,
know so often people are like, oh God, not values again, please, not values. But it's really true. We get handed a set of values when we're itty bitty baby creatures, and we are raised in an environment where somebody else's values shape our experience. And so often we don't pause long enough to ask ourselves, what values would I like to be shaping my experience now at this
mhm,
stage of the game?
mhm,
And so it's fascinating to me that just a real simple examination of values can be, it can provide so much fodder for just laying out a clear direction.
mhm.
And then once we have a sense of what those values are, which they really have evolved as we have evolved, and
Absolutely.
it's okay to recognize that.
Yep.
Once we know what those values are, then we have to look at our behaviors and our patterns and just the way we spend our time and our energy and our money and our attention. We've got to look at our priorities,
Mhm,
because I don't know about you, but in my experience, I've had those occasions where I really may value one thing,
mhm.
but the way I'm living, you might not guess it, because I'm
Uh-huh.
prioritizing everything else but that.
Yes.
But once we get our values and our priorities aligned,
Mhm.
well, that's when some magic starts to happen.
Oh, truly. So what are the things that you see happening once for your clients, for yourself, for your students, when those things kind of start to weave together?
I think very often there's a recognition, and sometimes it's a subtle one, and sometimes it's like oh fuck. I didn't There's the realization I didn't recognize that I was putting everybody else's opinions, expectations, values, needs, demands ahead of my own. Like,
Mhm,
almost like people, when they finally get this snapshot of the difference between how they say they want to live versus
mhm,
how they actually are living,
mhm.
it is a real wake-up call to it's a wake-up call to change.
Yeah.
And that to me is always incredibly gratifying, because just recognizing, I need to make a change. And to understand in more detail, I need to make a change around, like in this particular area or around this particular problem. The path really does start to get more clear. And then it becomes a question of, well, if I move in this direction, what am I likely to face? What kind of resistance will I face? What kind of opposition? Where will I have to make some trade-offs? What are some consequences I'll have to either live with or not be willing to live with? What kind of boundaries am I going to have to put in place or enforce? So we do get that initial nugget of like, change right here. And then it just opens up this whole new world of, okay, now what? But it's okay. I mean, to me, it can be daunting. Like, oh, I've got this big transformation to undertake. But what I hope I've given people is a semblance of a map, if you will. You know, it's not, I would never be so ridiculous as to say, you know, this book is like, 10 easy steps to freedom. But it is, excuse me, it is, I hope, a useful guide down a path in which people ask themselves smart, strategic, relevant questions. And from that, they can glean for themselves and from themselves the answers that make the most sense so they can continue to chart that path forward. And so all of that to say is that, the process that I outline in this book is not, it is not a one size fits all. You do step 1 and step 2 and step 3. It's not that prescriptive. It is, though, here is a framework that you can follow. And here are some questions that you can ask to mine and unearth and excavate the answers that are already inside you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful and important. And something that especially, as we tend to, as human beings, go into the new year, really want to look at where is our life not living up to our desires and expectations? Where is our life suboptimal? Where are areas where I'm feeling that I'm not quite getting where I want to go? And so I would love if you could share with us a little bit about what, I think you kind of have, but I want to give you an opportunity if you want to share in a different way or share some more about the book. What was your intention in writing this book and sharing what you teach in this format?
I mean, the intention at its most fundamental was that I didn't want anybody else to feel the same kind of anguish that I felt when I felt stuck. I wanted to give people the permission, if they needed it, to be able to make a change without any sort of guilt or shame or second guessing. Because you know what? Somebody else had to give me that permission. And this might sound crazy. I mean, when I was doing all of the hand wringing 10 years ago about whether to leave corporate America, do I leave the 6-figure salary job? Do I step off of the fast track to, quote, success? And instead follow my soul, which, I mean, my soul was just screaming at me, please do something different, but I couldn't reconcile in my brain. I couldn't somehow reconcile the question of, but if I've been going down this path for so long and it's a path that makes sense and it's a path that I'm good at, like, who am I to step off this path? A million different people might be happier than a pig in shit to be walking down this path. And who am I to say, no, thanks, not for me? And it wasn't until a dear friend of mine literally gave me this permission. This is the story that I recount to open the book. We were walking on this beach in San Francisco, and we had been walking at that point already for a couple of miles, and we're on vacation. And I was just bitching and moaning and lamenting my job, my job, my job. And, I was going back and forth about, well, maybe I could, I'd already gone to a part-time schedule. Maybe I could just do, I could reduce my hours even more, or maybe I could just work for one client. Or this was my favorite, like, maybe I could move to HR, as if I know anything about HR. And she just kind of stopped me, and she looked at me and she was like, you know what? If you are this unhappy doing what you're doing, why don't you just do something different? And I was like, what?
Huh?
And she's like, no, I'm serious. She's like, just do something different. And if that doesn't work out, do something different again. And she's like, you're smart and you're marketable and you will figure it out. And I remember Amanda being totally blown away in that moment, because here I was like almost 40 years old. I was running a multi-million-dollar piece of business. I had 2 little children that I grew and I was responsible for. And I counseled C-suite executives at Fortune 500 companies. And I didn't understand that I had the permission. I had the authority within me to make a different choice for my life.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, if I didn't understand that, I bet there are lots of other people who don't understand it too. And so if a little nudge of permission from a stranger would be a useful kick in the pants, then that's what I've written this book for. That's
so much. Yes. And that is, I know you understand now how many intelligent, capable, successful people need someone to point out almost what we would consider the obvious. But when you are stuck in that pattern of almost self-importance with what you have created for yourself, it is so hard to see. And I know that you cover, we talked about work because that is the most obvious one, but in other places where it's painful, like relationships or habits or whatever else you might be stuck in, I'm just really excited for people to read this book. And in fact, the day that I got this, I had a girlfriend over who she was having kind of the tornado of stuckness start to come up. She was having something with her business that wasn't feeling congruent, something with her romantic partner. And I looked at her and I looked at the book and I said, I think this got delivered for you. I think you're supposed to read it. And she kind of was just like, And the more that I've read it, I'm very certain, like, I think this book is not here for me. I mean, it is here for me, but there are so many of you people, wonderful people listening right now who this book is for. You are stuck somewhere in your life and you need someone, a stranger, a beautiful stranger from the internet named Becky Vollmer or whomever to tell you it's okay to do something different, even if it doesn't seem permissible or socially acceptable or whatever excuse you've given yourself for staying put where you are. If you're unhappy and your soul is calling to you to do something else, I think that this book will serve you and teach you something or give you a little nugget of wisdom or a nudge in the right way.
Oh my gosh, if that isn't the kindest, sweetest testimonial, I don't know what is. But I mean, thank you for saying that. And that really, truly is my hope that, just some of the nuggets of wisdom in the book, and God knows I cannot claim credit for all of them. It's a true joy to me that within this book, I've been able to include so many teachings from other people that have influenced me and shaped my journey.
Yeah.
And so there are so many other voices that I include. So if one of those nuggets of wisdom is the catalyst for somebody feeling a little more empowered to, first of all, get connected to her soul, but then also to act on what her soul is begging her to do, then I would just be the happiest person in the world.
Yes. Well, I would love for that to happen too, because we need more people doing that. We just need, that's where we are in this world. We need people waking up and charging towards their calling, whatever that is in what area of their lives. So thank you so much, Becky, for putting this work out into the world and coming here today to share it with us, and just for being who you are. And I would love to introduce more people to your work. So can you tell us where we can hang out with you? You have like a whirlwind tour coming up of, of the world as you are promoting this book and sharing your practices. But So tell us, where can we hang out with you online, and then where can we catch you otherwise in the upcoming future?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I appreciate it. Probably the best spot online is my website. It's youarenotstuck.com.
Mhm.
Really, every place I am is You Are Not Stuck. That's the handle on Instagram. Facebook is You Are Not Stuck / Becky Vollmer. Facebook was really where I started this journey back
Mhm.
in 2014. It was a
Yeah.
Facebook page that I started on a whim just to share messages of empowerment. And then, over all these years, it's turned into the coolest, just global. I don't even want to call it a community. It might sound cheesy, but it really feels like a family of people
Mhm.
who are, seeking and navigating change and navigating their past and their present and their future. And the amount of open sharing and support that comes through that page is fabulous. And then there's another way that I bring that to life through a weekly Zoom based meeting I host every Wednesday at noon Eastern. That's called The Circle, and there's information on that on the website too. And then I'm hitting the road a couple days after Christmas. I'll be teaching again my annual New Year's Eve retreat at Kripalu in Western Massachusetts, and I'll be there for a few days, and then sharing some thoughts on New Year's Eve. I'm sorry, on New Year's Day at Canyon Ranch, and then I'm headed down to Boston for a book launch party on actual publication day, which is January 3rd. Yay! So Boston, and then I'll be doing a couple things in New York before I finally get back home to St. Louis and get to celebrate with friends and family here. And then it's back out on the road. It's San Francisco on January 13th. So all of that is on the website. I'd love
Yay. So
come out.
Yeah, if you want to support, I'll leave information in the show notes about ordering or the book, ordering a copy, and then also links to get to Becky's website where she will share if maybe you are in a place where you could meet her in person and get your book signed and say hello and learn from her IRL. I think that would be really amazing too.
I'd love it. After all these years of now, like looking at people through the little green dot in my computer and just seeing nothing but pixels, I am so ready to be back out in the real world and literally wrapping arms around people.
Yes.
And just having hugs and smiles and community togetherness.
So we need it. Excited. We need it. And Becky gives great hugs. So if you can get an in-person hug from Becky, I highly recommend.
Well, ditto for you too.
Oh, all right, friends. Thank you so much. We will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Amanda.
Y'all, how much do we love Becky Vollmer? She is just so great. Please, please, please go purchase her book. It is on sale now. Link down in the show notes to get to it quickly on Amazon, but you can find it on her book or wherever you love to buy your books. And I also wanted to mention that if you are listening during this first week of the year, that we are starting the year off with my Unbottled Potential Dry January Challenge. You can join up until January 6th. It is a month-long challenge filled with resources, tools, inspiration, mindset shifts to help you break up with alcohol and break through to your best life. It is $44 to join, and you get weekly podcast episodes delivered directly to you. So you get audio lessons that you can listen to absolutely anywhere. And this is for you, whether you are ready to break up with alcohol, you're just in that first sober curious stage, or you've already broken up with alcohol and now you're ready to use that as a platform to break through to your best life, that life you have been wanting to live and dreaming of. And I am here to help you out. So if you're interested in that, link down in the show notes, or you can always DM me over on Instagram. Just DM me the words Dry January if it's before January 6th, and we will get you all set up to join us. I think it's going to be an amazing month and an amazing way to kick off your year. Now with that, I hope you have a great day. We will catch you here next time.